On this episode of Today in World War II, November 29th, New Zealand and British troops occupy Crete. An 18-year-old Russian partisan is executed but becomes hero of the Soviet Union. The E-boat flotilla out of France has a great day against the English in the English Channel. A United States submarine takes out a lot of Japanese troops, and a ship bearing U.S. Allied prisoners is accidentally sunk by our own forces, and there's mass executions that follow. And finally, a United States submarine knocks off the biggest aircraft carrier in the history of the war. Let's get started. All right, so in today's date of November 29th, 1940, General Freyberg's British and New Zealand troops occupied Crete. They did this because the Germans had invaded Greece from Albania. They were they were there to rescue the Italians, who had a fiasco when it came to them trying to invade Greece. The Greeks fought valiantly, pushed them back into Albania, and would have totally decimated the Italians if the Germans hadn't come in. And of course, they rolled over the Greeks. There's no way the Greeks can handle, lightning war against the Wehrmacht at that time. So, in an effort to salvage the situation and to be able to maintain sea control of the Mediterranean, that Eastern Mediterranean, Churchill made the decision to send British troops, including New Zealanders, into Crete to occupy it and be ready for an expected attack. Well, the attack came. It just wasn't in the form that they were considering or had thought of. We'll get into that later on as we get further on into this year. But suffice it to say, this move set the foundation for one of the most famous battles in World War II. And one of the most famous things you can do for me is to subscribe to my channel. The way you do it is very simple. Down below where the description is, there's a button that says subscribe. Just click that and then look for the bell. You click on the bell, and that means that whenever I drop a video, which I do practically every day, you'll be notified immediately, and you can go consume that content that I so painstakingly and thoroughly compile for you. All right, on today, November 29th, 1941, very sad story happened on the Eastern Front. And if you know anything about the history of the Eastern Front, you know that it wasn't much light and happy things happening there. In this case, this was in, like I said, 1941. This was the first major offensive. This was the initial invasion the Germans conducted against the Soviet Union. They were pushing on to Moscow. They were pushing on a huge wide front all the way through the Baltics, White Russia, and Ukraine. And so there was lots of partisan activity to resist the Germans. Now, there was a partisan fighter, a young girl. She was 18 years old, named Zoya Kosmodemyanskaya, and she was in the Komsomol, which was the Young Communist League, very patriotic. And she crossed the lines to set fire to a bunch of villages and places where Soviet intelligence had indicated that they were being occupied and used by German troops. Well, their first attack was successful. They did fire a number of houses and villages, but unfortunately, as she wanted to continue the operation, she was captured. And I don't think I need to tell you exactly, what the Germans were brutal. Let's just put it that way, okay? She was captured. They whipped her 200 times. They burnt her, and then they hanged her. And her last words, not paraphrasing, there obviously, there's two versions, but the gist of it is, you can hang me, you can kill me, but there's 200 million of us. You can't kill us all. And of course, they hung her and left her body to hang there as an example to other would-be partisans. And in fact, on New Year's, or Christmas, there was a drunken German soldier cut her breast off. I don't know, a trophy or whatever, but it was just horrible, just a horrible thing. But it took a little while, but word got back to the Soviet Union of her heroism and her defiance in the face of just unbearable torture. And she was named a hero of the Soviet Union. And, her name lives in glory even to this day over there. I know because I was over there. I lived there for almost 20 years and I speak fluent Russian. And so, yes, she was an example and an inspiration and helped to stiffen resistance at a time when they were really getting their butts kicked initially by the Germans. So, all let her memory be eternal, for her countrymen. If you like what I give you, if you like the content that I provide for you, I would really hope that you would like my video. Just go down, below the screen. There's a thumbs up and a thumbs down. Hit the thumbs up, of course. And then as a special request, just make a comment. I would love, I mean, it doesn't matter. The algorithm doesn't care about your comment, what you say or don't say. They just want to see that you're engaging in my content. So I would really appreciate that. And thanks a lot. Okay, on November 29th, 1941, the German 4th Motor Torpedo Boat Flotilla attacked an Allied convoy that was in transit through the English Channel that was going to make its way uh, into London. They attacked a convoy FN 564, and they managed to sink a tanker and two freighters. The tanker, of course, was in World War II was always the prize because Britain had to import everything. It didn't have any of its oil reserves on its own, so everything had to be imported. And so when you took out a tanker, not only did you destroy the gasoline or the oil in its hold, you also took out there's one less ship available to send to get more oil. So that was a very big day for the German E-boats. German E-boats operating out of France were very successful. They were a very serious threat to Allied shipping. And later in the war, and we'll get into this, at a later date, in a later video, they had a major impact on the Normandy invasion. So I'll just leave that like that. But just let you know, again, it's one of those things about the war that it doesn't get a lot of attention, but it's fascinating to spend some time reading about it and getting introduced to the fact that there's so many different kinds of warfare and units, and everybody, did took care of their own little responsibility. And in this case, the Germans were really good at this. Okay, so on November 29th, 1943, a very tragic event happened off in the Java Sea. A U.S. submarine saw a Japanese freighter, the Suez Maru, and thought it was a legitimate target. The Japanese did not put any indications that it was carrying POWs, but it was carrying 422 British and 127 Dutch prisoners of war. They were being transported away from Indonesia, closer to the mainland. I'm sure they were going to be used for forced labor. That was generally how they were used. Well, the bonefish shot and torpedoed the ship, and it was sinking. And unfortunately, because these prisoners were locked down in the hold, but below the waterline, a lot of them drowned. The ones that did manage to escape, the wounded, I guess there was estimated between 200 and 250 Allied prisoners survived the initial attack and the sinking of the ship, but the Japanese escort ships started machine gunning, defenseless sailors, excuse me, POWs. But that's what it was like fighting against the Japanese in World War II. And their code of Bushido, any enemy that surrendered had no honor, and therefore they could do whatever they wanted with them. Doesn't excuse it, but that was the excuse they used to just treat our POWs horribly. The the survival rate or the mortality rate of Allied POWs was almost 90%. It was worse. It was total barbarity. Like I said in previous videos, what went on the Eastern Front between the Germans and the Soviets, that was pretty bad. It was almost worse in how the Japanese treated Allied prisoners and Chinese population and prisoners. They were just absolutely brutal. So unfortunately, and of course the bonefish had no idea, like I said, because the Japanese never ever marked their ships with POWs. On November 29th, 1944, the biggest scalp in the history of the submarine force in World War II was taken by the USS Archerfish. They saw that the biggest Japanese aircraft carrier, actually the biggest carrier in the war that had been built, was just coming out of the harbor on the Japanese home islands, and the Archer fish tracked and attacked with torpedoes, and the attack caused uncontrollable flooding in the Shinano, and eventually it capsized and was sunk. Now, from a overall, if you look at, did this affect the war at all in any way, shape, or form? No, because by this time, the Japanese really had no air fleet left. The battle of the Marianas Turkey Shoot in earlier in the year, plus the battle in the Philippines had reduced their experienced pilots to a minimal. All they had left were poorly trained replacements, and they weren't trained well enough to take off and land on carriers. But they had already started the construction before that happened, so it was kind of an empty shell in a sense that it wasn't going to make any difference at all in the war. Nevertheless, of course, sinking a carrier of any kind in World War II was a big deal. And just with its sheer tonnage and size, and that was a big deal for the USS Archerfish. And it's kind of a interesting footnote in World War II history. But like again, in the long scheme of things, it didn't matter at all. But good for the Archerfish for getting that huge scalp. Well, thank you again for watching this video. I look forward to getting you another video tomorrow, and you have a great day.